The stifled flowering of entrepreneurship in a post-Soviet culture. If you are a Westerner who has grown up in a predominantly free society, you've had your paradigm for interacting with the world formed primarily by the opportunities afforded to you by your and your neighbor's abundant liberty. It's something often taken for granted, the freedom to, in large part, determine your own values, your own philosophical identity, your own role in society, the information and activities you will fill your own life with, and how you will pursue your own highest sense of happiness and purpose. It might be difficult or even impossible for you to imagine what life would be like if such essential choices were withheld from you, determined for you by a centralized authority that claimed the right to make them on your behalf and enforce your compliance through threats of imprisonment, forced labor, or execution. That bleak depiction is precisely what life was like for millions of people living in one of the 15 nations under communist rule in the Soviet Union until just 30 years ago in 1991. The communist system collapsed after 71 years, and the citizens of previously dictatorially controlled nations were free again to do what they saw fit with their own lives, according to whatever best served their interests. Despite the fundamental economic, educational, and political changes that have emerged since those dark and directionless early days of independence, the methods many such people learned to live by continue to be carried over in their lives, and the lives of their children and grandchildren now, even long after they gained the freedom to make those decisions for themselves. Concepts related to business, wealth accumulation, self-fulfillment, and the conscious pursuit of meaningful goals that might seem to be common knowledge and in the best interests of all people continue to be overlooked. Not because people are too unintelligent or oblivious to understand them, but because they have been conditioned by generations of restricted freedoms and fear-based incentives away from such proactive ideas. In the oppressive world they grew up in, such concepts were irrelevant or even dangerous to consider, so it's no wonder that there's still lingering reluctance in post-Soviet cultures to think about entrepreneurship proactively. In the command economy of the Soviet Union, control over providing the basic necessities of life was taken out of the hands of individuals, so those individuals never developed paradigms that would have empowered them to take care of their own needs. Whatever they needed was provided for them in a bare minimum fashion without any possibility of disagreement or choice about what was proclaimed the best possible manner for the good of Soviet society. And when the state inevitably failed to adequately deliver the necessities it promised, there was no recourse or alternative avenues available to acquire what was needed. Even if individuals were clever and ambitious enough to devise alternative means of production and economic exchange outside the tyrannical rule of their Soviet leaders, they faced harsh and violent treatment from the penal system for doing so. It was illegal to even think or speak ideas that were counter to communist ideals, as an anti-Soviet mentality was classified as a mental disorder by the state. Contributing to propaganda that weakened Soviet authority or defamed the Soviet state was punishable by up to a decade behind bars. Why was it inevitable that the centralized planners running the show and determining who needed what goods and services, and in what quantities, would fail integrally at their task? Why was the Soviet Union doomed to collapse from the outset? The answer is simple, and it is the same answer that explains why any intentional effort can fail to produce the intended outcome. The methods employed were incompatible with the reality being dealt with. No one can ignore the laws of economics because they seem unfair or inconvenient and expect a positive outcome. They likewise cannot ignore the laws of physics, even if being stuck to the ground or the inability to phase through solid objects is a bit inconvenient, or that 2 and 2 make 4 just because they prefer the sum to be 5. They cannot succeed in these defiances against reality, even with the full might of the Red Army to support their opposition.